Hi everyone, and welcome to the Friday, March 11th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter for NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson, our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, the war goes on, it's getting worse. And it's been a wild week. I mean, it's beginning to affect all of the world's markets, and all of us, in one way or another. So, what do you think?
Well, right. I mean, for example, just to take a couple of examples, the oil market's affected because of what Russia is doing,
Yes.
largely, but it's also now affected by what we're doing. We're saying no more imports of Russian oil. Obviously, a huge invasion of this scale. People are uncertain. That affects the markets, but also we're pulling businesses out of Russia. We're putting sanctions on, and so that affects things too. And it's easy to say, and this is how I feel. I'm not going to get too exercised by $6 gas when people in Ukraine are losing their lives and
Right.
They're refugees without homes.
Well, we can multi-process.
But right, no, I know
Yes.
it's true, and there are wide-ranging effects of this, and it's
Sure.
one of those things where you might sit back here in, let's say, Silicon Valley and think, oh, it's those guys, that doesn't affect me. But like you said, it really affects everybody. If you're a commuter, you're affected. If you're a shopper, you're affected. We can say, oh, the price of oil is high and gas is high. Well, go get an EV. Nope.
Nope.
Nickel is affected. A lot of the
Yes, I was
materials we
gonna talk
talked about
about
this
that.
weeks ago. Yeah, it's
Russia
affected.
supplies 12% of the world's supply of nickel, and the futures in that jumped 1,200% on the London Metal Exchange.
Right. So
And
everybody
trading was suspended.
exactly.
Yeah.
So as oil goes up, everybody becomes an environmentalist. All right, now I'll get a clean car, but it's very hard to do.
Well, you can get a car, but it won't have a battery in it.
Well, right. So it's a widespread effect, and I think it's not going to go away anytime soon. You add that to the sort of winds of inflation that were already blowing our way, housing prices, and it's just as people are starting to
Right.
think, hey, I can go places now without a mask. Maybe I'll go dine out or do some social things. The price of everything is so high that people are going to have to cut back on that economically,
Absolutely.
not just because of the pandemic.
I noticed the Biden administration the other day said that the inflation is due to Putin, but actually there was only 4 days in February that actually the war was going on in the Ukraine that affected inflation. This month, we're really going to see the impact. I'm starting to hear 10% inflation.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. It's like looking at the price of gas or oil. We're seeing levels that for many people they haven't seen ever. And
Yeah.
that's just because there's really no ceiling on these prices, because you have a lot of factors, the supply chain factors, even the pandemic factors, certainly inflation. So when you say, gee, what can a gallon of milk cost or what will my produce cost, it's likely to be levels that you've never seen before.
I drove by the gas station, the cheapest one in Sunnyvale. I drove by it, and was utterly appalled at the prices. I mean,
Sure.
they're going up 20%, 20 cents every couple of days. What shocked me though was the first time I looked at the list of prices, and I went down to the green one, diesel.
Hmm.
Diesel is more expensive than premium gas right now. I understand it takes $1,100 to fill the tanks of a semi in the South right now.
I mean, that's a huge, huge expense that
That's
multiplies
going to
over
get
and over.
pushed right onto prices.
Right.
They say we're going to see the price of milk go up to a level because it's not only hitting the delivery system, it's hitting farmers because
Right.
they can't. Apparently today, Russia just announced it's going to stop shipping fertilizer. Okay, now where do we grow our food? How do we feed the cattle? I mean, we can see this thing just rippling all the way through.
Right, and that's why no matter where you are or how insulated you think you are from these inflationary concerns or from this
Yes.
war, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm fine. I drive an EV or whatever." I mean, you eat.
Yeah.
These things are going to come home, and you're right. I think this month is where we really, really feel it.
We talked a while back. I went through the '70s inflation, But that was different because interest rates got up to 20%, and the Fed immediately started choking down money. And that was a way to beat it finally. I mean, it was painful. But right now, we're heading towards super high inflation, but we're also printing money like crazy. And that doesn't pull that throws gasoline on inflation. It doesn't
Yeah.
pull, it doesn't put out the fire. So I think, I'm starting to hear terrifying things like this could take a decade. This could take a generation to finally get it out of our system again.
I don't know. I mean, people always make worst case scenarios,
Yeah.
and I understand economists have to do that because that's a possibility. But
Yeah, that's what remember Truman said he wanted a one-armed economist because they're always saying, well, on the one hand,
right.
but well, also on the other hand.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I'm not going to jump that far ahead, but to say, how do we deal with this now? If you have to put food on the table, if you have to commute, if you have to pay rent, these are real concerns. Even in California,
Yes.
Governor Newsom saying, well, we have this surplus, why not use it to help people put gas in their cars? That's a very basic, focused thing, and I think that's what we're going to need to see to keep people going. It's ironic that the price of gas is soaring right as companies say, okay, now come back to work.
Come back to work.
Hit the freeways again.
Get back on the road. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, good luck with that.
Uh, it's going to have other interesting effects. I looked up lithium because obviously that's the key to the Tesla you drive, and batteries and everything. We're increasingly a battery-driven economy. This is going to affect environmentalists because there are two places where you get lithium: China, Nevada. And environmentalists have been stopping the mining of lithium in Nevada. Well, there's going to be an enormous political and social pressure. I mean, it's going to create some interesting enemies.
Right.
Tesla drivers versus environmentalists. This could really change everything on the table in the next 6 months.
Again, we've talked about this before on your show, but like Thomas Friedman said, we're in a flat Earth, and we're all really connected by everything that goes on.
Yes.
And I think we're going to start to feel that even more as this crisis continues.
Yeah, we enjoyed the benefits of being
Right.
interconnected, and now we're seeing the cost. Russia's ruling party, United Russia, said Wednesday that they're going to begin the process of nationalizing assets of foreign firms that leave the country. Well, there's a lot of firms. I mean, not just McDonald's and Starbucks, but Apple. There's a number of technology companies that have just decided to move out.
Right. That's because of the sanctions and because of companies that are moving out. I have some experience of this. A few years back, I was in Russia as a tourist,
Yeah.
and it was interesting because, Putin is Putin and he always has been. So at the time, there were sanctions from Europe
Yeah.
because of, I think, an Ukrainian aggression. And at the time, Putin said, well, that's okay. We'll just nationalize everything. We'll make our own wine, our own champagne, our own cheese, all the things that people got from places like France that the, wealthy enjoyed. And they didn't enjoy it as much because it was made by Russia.
It was made by Russia, yeah.
And, there are places that specialize in things. And Putin said, it doesn't matter, we'll do it ourselves. So now, you don't have a McDonald's or a Starbucks, the list goes on and on. Is Russia going to be able to please its citizens?
Yes.
And I met a lot of really young people who appreciated their nice clothes and their nice
And their latte
beverages
in the
and their
morning.
iPhones and their
Yes.
lattes in the morning. Right. I don't think they're going to be pleased. And this is what I think why the Starbucks and Netflixes and all these guys are putting pressure to let Putin know his people don't appreciate this.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We drew the parallels with Czechoslovakia and Germany, but Germany was a rapidly growing economy and society in the late 30s. Russia is a declining population with a falling life expectancy and a rapidly falling GNP. This strikes me as a whole different scenario in that regard, how long they can maintain what they've got, what they're trying to do right now. And I think, well, everybody's worried now. It all comes down to Putin, and nobody knows how far he's willing to go.
I think some people know how far he's willing to go, and that's why they're so worried.
Yeah.
He's not going to take defeat.
No.
And Who knows what he will do to ensure victory? That's what people are scared of.
Yeah, and they're not giving him a way out. You know, the noose is closing rapidly. Yeah. Okay, from Grove, lots of reports right now of cyber attacks on all parts of our government and critical infrastructure. He said the geek wars that we've always been anticipating have finally arrived. Our safety is in the hands of the pocket protectors. It's them against old Soviet spooks. Well, I think there's a lot of young Soviets.
I was going to say, I wouldn't
there.
call them old. You know, they're not messing around. They may be on a path towards
Well,
Soviet again, but
so we're about to find out how well we're protected from
Right.
cyber attacks. I mean, if they go after the grid, they could cause a hell of a lot of trouble.
right. And you know, early on in this conflict, that was expected, and we know that firms here in Silicon Valley are really girding for this and are on the lookout. And so far, as you and I speak right now,
The lights are still
right, the lights are on. You're able to shop online. You're able to date online. You know, your computer is working. And that's a bit of testament to those protections.
Well,
and
Comcast went down for about an hour. For the first half hour, I thought, those Russians, those dirty Russians.
I imagine that anytime something goes down,
Yeah.
people will think that.
I think what's scarier is Russia's teaming up with China, and China has the best hackers in the world right now. And you got to wonder if they're going to get into the game too, under
Right.
the cover of the Russian attacks.
Well, you're hearing talk of a cyber NATO, right?
Yeah.
Trying to do the same thing for cybersecurity that we do militarily, and that would be interesting for the same reason that it's been an interesting protection,
Right.
you know, since the days that NATO started. But also a nod to the fact that cyber concerns are absolutely at the forefront.
Yeah, this is truly a 21st century war we're watching.
Yeah,
in
and-
every
and-
way. I mean, we're watching in real time a war going on. We're seeing missiles land.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's quite amazing.
And at the same time, you're seeing where that focus turns in terms of what people depend on. You said at
Yeah.
the top, the markets are falling. And yeah, we've seen a really big drop the last few weeks
Right.
in equities and things like that. The exception being cybersecurity companies, because everybody is really sort of
Yeah.
looking at them as our protection. And again, so
they're,
far
they're
as
the last rampart.
right, and so far, again, as you and I speak, so good. But people are already sort of assuming the worst. Your cable goes out and you think it's a Russian. But,
Damn Russians. Cryptocurrency. Along we're on crypto, let's talk about cryptocurrency. It went up this week. It had a pretty good week.
One day.
After fears. It fell for what? It fell for several percent. 7% month to date, 16% year to date. But what struck me as bizarre is it went up when the administration announced a new plan for the monitoring of cryptocurrency. I thought the whole point of cryptocurrency was to stay away from government surveillance. And now the markets are cheering, and cryptocurrency companies are cheering the fact that the United States government may now put safeguards and controls and monitoring on cryptocurrency.
this is the equivalent of your favorite indie band
Yeah.
suddenly having a big hit and getting rich.
Yeah.
Right. The true crypto community is saying, wait a minute, this is exactly what we wanted to avoid. We want a currency that is under the radar that the government doesn't even know about.
Yeah.
We don't want any government regulation. That's the last thing we want. The crypto investors are looking at this and saying, aha, it's another check in the legitimacy
Right.
column.
We're going down the list to make it legit, to eventually make it the de facto
Right,
currency.
and so as an investment, and again, I've separated the currency and speculative investment categories of crypto. Let's say Bitcoin. Bitcoin soars on the news that it's a more protected investment, sort of like your money in the bank with the FDIC.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the Achilles heels of Bitcoin and crypto in general is it's apparently quite susceptible to theft,
Right.
not to mention wild ups and downs in the market. So if the government regulates it, aha, it's a little safer. But again, the OG crypto traders or currency people are saying, wait, this is exactly what we don't want.
And we keep seeing this. We've been seeing this now for a generation. We announce an emergency, and then we put it under government regulation. This is just going to drive that economy more underground.
Maybe. I mean, one of the things people were watching was as stocks fell because of the early days of the war,
Right.
and oil went up quite a bit, I mean, to record highs. You saw some strength in gold as a sort of safe haven, but crypto went down, and people thought, wait a minute, this is the first time we've really seen crypto in a giant crisis like this. And some people thought it might be more like gold or, palladium or something, a safe haven.
Well, that's what we'd always were sold on.
Yeah, and it turned out not to be, at least in the early stages. But again, I've always said it's just too early for crypto to figure out what it means as an investment.
Okay, so the Treasury Department has 60 to 180 days to look into this and come back to the president with their recommendations.
And again, there is a side of me that says, okay, now that crypto is really in the mainstream, we do need protection because of all the young people who are putting their hard-earned rent money in it that shouldn't do that, by the way. But they don't listen to me.
Right.
And I get that.
Yeah, but you're young. You get to be stupid a few times.
Right, exactly. I have lots of experience with teens not listening to me. But
don't we all?
If it is indeed something that's in the mainstream, I get that the government wants to and perhaps should protect it. But I do feel for the original crypto guys who are saying, this means we don't have what we originally wanted.
Well, the good news is kids are smarter than the feds, and they're going to come up with some other solution to go underground.
I would agree with that 100%.
Okay, such a story of our time. Jack Sweeney, 19 years old, of the University of Central Florida, who's the guy that's been tracking Elon Musk's jet, figured out how to do that using aircraft transponders and all that. He's now tracking Russian oligarchs to help officials in the West grab their planes wherever they are. They're already grabbing their giant mega yachts. Now this 19-year-old kid is figuring out how to track the oligarchs' planes in order to capture them too.
I mean, the bizarre ways social media is used and misused at a time of war, we're really seeing this in real time for the first time. And it never, I mean, not only day by day am I fascinated with this, but literally minute by minute. What's taken down, what's allowed to stay, all the rumors surrounding Facebook and Twitter and TikTok. You're seeing some of the sites that cater to right-wing people now saying, we're all about free speech.
Yeah.
We'll allow this Russian misinformation thing to stay up because it's free speech. Right. So literally you have...
And Facebook is allowing you to talk about assassinating.
Right. That was the next thing I was going to bring up.
Like, Facebook wait a minute.
Right. We'll censor this, but we'll allow you to talk about assassination on Facebook.
Right.
Again, Facebook just can't get out of its own way. But we have social media right-wing sites saying, hey, let's let the Russians communicate. It's just a bizarro world.
And once again, everything is being upended, and we don't know how it's going to settle out. But it's going to be different. It's going to be fundamentally different. I mean, we've gone through these, I don't even know what you call them, social gestalt switches, changes in the zeitgeist every few years now. Mm-hmm. I mean, we kind of predicted it. I wrote a whole book about it, but I'm still astonished how fast we overturn everything now.
Right. Internet time is a different kind of time.
Yeah.
And
we have a Moore's law of global society now.
I like that.
Yeah.
Doubles every year with less price.
Well, they always tell that story. It began with memory chips, and it went to processors, and it went to devices, and it went to everything else. And now I really think the entire world is on Moore's law.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Meanwhile, Amazon's quite confident.
Well, right. They're still riding.
They have that much cash. They're doing a 20 to 1 stock split.
Well, because their stock is
buyback.
Thousands of dollars right now.
Yeah.
And, you can say, there are all sorts of reasons for a split. Yes, it shows confidence. It allows the more average everyday investor to come in.
Gets the price down.
Right. But also, and we saw this with Google and their 20-for-1 split.
Right.
Apple had a couple of big splits. Even Tesla. If you want to get into the Dow Jones Industrial Average, look at the stock prices of those companies. They're not $3,000 a stock. That's intimidatingly high. So who knows if that's Google or Alphabet's endgame or Amazon's endgame, but I wouldn't be surprised. And there is a case to be made for a company like Amazon being in the Dow.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? If Walmart gets in, why not Amazon?
Sure. I mean, it's a hell of a lot bigger than an awful lot of the companies on the Dow.
Right, and it's...
And NASDAQ has a whole different vibe,
Well, the NASDAQ has a very techie vibe, obviously.
Yeah.
the Dow has gotten a more techie vibe with companies like Microsoft and Apple, et
Sure.
cetera. And I think it's going to look even closer at.
But the Dow seems more stable
Right.
than NASDAQ.
Well,
less frothy, to use your term.
yes, and that's why it will look more at older companies with a stable stock price. And Amazon will rise and fall by hundreds of dollars just by virtue of its having such a high stock price. You know, cut that by 20 and say you have a $150, $180 stock price. That's going to be more stable, a lot more shares on the market. And again, you have a really, really big part, important part, I would say, of our economy. Why not put that in the Dow?
Yeah, and I think we're trapped in the past a little bit. It's like, well, that's IBM and GE and General Motors, but they weren't much older than these companies when they went on the Dow.
Right.
You know, we forget how long some of these companies have been around. I mean, Apple's been around for 40 years. So, yeah, why not? Okay, the Apple event, was it virtual or was it in person this time?
It was virtual.
Still virtual?
Yep, so I watched it on my laptop.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah, it really wasn't.
Okay, so $4,000 Mac.
Yeah, the new Mac Studio. And this was interesting. I was wondering if Apple was going to do this because here we are, inflation is absolutely biting down on people.
Right.
To the point where even commuting is really eating into your ability to pay rent and buy things. Is Apple going to come out with something high end? And it did.
Yeah.
And we can gloss over this by just saying, look, if you're a creator,
Yeah, but
$4,000
those
for a
guys
computer.
are going to spend a lot of money
Right.
because they need to have state of the art.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The computing power that you can have, and granted, you have to pay a lot for it, but you can go out and make a Pixar movie or something. I mean, the computing power at your disposal is crazy right now.
Right.
But also, the more important move to me that I waited to see was Apple upgrading the SE, the iPhone SE.
Yeah, well, that's because you always buy the previous generation.
Well, but not just that. I think
You've done that for years.
Yes, I have. But that's just me. But also having kids when they reach like 12 and 13, and hey, everybody else has an iPhone.
Right.
I wasn't about to spend $800 to $1,200 on a phone.
Hand out $1,000 to give your daughter a phone.
Right. So I've always been a fan of the SE, and it's $300 to $400 price range.
Right.
Because it's a good solid phone. You can do everything on it, and by the way, it doesn't cost a whole lot. You spend $25 on a solid case. It's going to last a long time, even for a kid.
So it's $429.
Yeah. Which is a reasonable price given that phones now
Yeah.
cost $900 to $1,300.
Well, it's only up $30 from the previous one.
Right.
But I read an interesting article. A guy said the best iPhone deal under $500 is the iPhone 11. Still.
Yeah.
It's fast enough, and it's got a much bigger display.
Right. And that's another key, and I've taken advantage of this.
Isn't that what we're recording this on right now?
Yeah, in fact.
Yeah.
So it's a couple generations old, but it still does the job.
Right.
And if you're willing to not have the brand newest thing,
Right.
you save a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're having the latest. After all these years, it's just virtue signaling among nerds, I mean,
well, that's what people in my economic bracket, that's what
Right,
reporters
right.
say. Oh,
Right.
you don't need that. But I get it. People want the newest thing, whatever. There's a
No.
whole world of people who want the newest thing.
I understand.
But for those of us, who want to save a few bucks, Apple does allow you in their ecosystem, and I think the SE is very important, and the fact that they keep these.
I think the fact they kept the SE down in
Yeah.
a time of rampant inflation.
Right.
Because we didn't say this before, but inflation is a tax on poor people.
Yeah.
And as it gets high enough, it becomes a tax on the middle class.
Right.
And for a company to hold the ground on pricing and improve the product, bully for Apple.
Well, and one thing Apple continues to need to do, and remember in the old days it lost its way here with the education market
Yeah.
and all that stuff. It allowed Google and Chrome to jump in there. It really wants to hook people when they're young.
Sure.
And the SE is a great way to do that. But right, if you tell people that don't have a lot of money, or even middle class people, hey, you're struggling right now, and your kid wants an iPhone, go spend $1,100. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But go spend $420. Okay.
And arguably, $30 price increase
Right.
is actually a net improvement in the price.
Well,
if you
because I think
factor
it's
in
that
inflation.
important that it gets young people into the system.
Yeah, no,
There
I
are too
think-
many choices not to.
I think Apple keeps making smart moves.
I agree.
Company drives me crazy sometimes. It has for many, many years. But All kudos to them. They make smart choices.
Well, they do call themselves genius, right? So
Oh yeah,
even
of course.
that, yeah.
Yeah, we're all geniuses, especially here in Silicon Valley, especially during good times.
Right.
Okay, finally, I didn't expect to see you today because, oh, I'm sure you've been waiting for this. The Elizabeth Holmes's lover and CEO, right, or president?
He was the president.
And
Yes.
COO, Sonny Balwani. His trial starts now.
Yeah. So the last couple of days I've been in court for jury selection, and there is a sameness. There is a Michael Corleone. Just when I thought I got out, they pulled me back in, feeling to this.
I know people that watch you regularly, and they were excited you were covering the Holmes trial, and then after 3 months they were like, "How's Scott holding up?"
Well, I gotta say, it was fascinating covering the Holmes trial, as you and I talked about.
But now you're back in.
Yeah, and I wonder, and I don't even know. I'm a reporter. I'm at the whim of the producers and what they want to
Yeah.
see. I don't know yet how, and I think I speak for a lot of media, both locally and nationally. I don't know how excited we're going to get about the Sunny Balwani
Yeah,
trial.
unless it really blows up, and I don't see how it does, unless there's some shocking revelation. But she delivered the shocking revelation.
Right, and
you know,
they really want to tamp that stuff down, especially the abuse and how
Yeah.
he mistreated employees at Theranos. We will see what comes of this. We don't even know if Balwani will testify. When it came to Holmes, the sort of ace in the hole that her defense team had was we already knew that she was very charming
Right.
and a good speaker and could convince people. And so, okay, they put her on the stand.
well, that was a big reveal.
Right.
Right. No one. A lot of people were betting against her ever saying a word.
Right.
Including your press peers there.
A lot of people thought she would not testify, whatever, but she did.
Yeah.
And okay, it didn't work. She was found guilty on 4 charges, but she did. You could see why. She comes
Right.
across as very professional and very charming, etc. We don't have that tape of Sunny Balwani. He didn't do interviews.
No.
He, you see him occasionally on one of these documentaries, but
And he
we
seems
don't
to
know
have a
much about him.
reputation as kind of being the muscle, the tough guy of
Right.
the operation. That's not going to be an appealing character trait.
No, and if indeed the testimony steers towards, oh, Sonny, yeah, he was the muscle, he was the guy that fired me.
Yeah.
Do you then want to put him on the stand? I don't know. You may have to humanize him, but I don't know. The interesting thing with this is a lot of what this trial is about already happened.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that whole thing is on trial again. I'm surprised, frankly, he didn't cut a deal and avoid all this.
Right.
Because now, for the first time, he's the guy on camera every day walking in. He's the focus, and that
But
isn't
I
necessarily.
don't think there's going to be Balwani fans out there dressed up as him.
No, shockingly, I didn't see anybody dressed up as Sonny.
You know what? The only revelation in the news recently about him that surprised me was he met Elizabeth Holmes in China at some conference.
Right.
He was 37 years old and married, and she was 18.
Right.
Well, that kind of puts a whole new spin on the story.
Well, we knew that, and it's why people talked about the Svengali defense.
Yeah,
Someone who's
absolutely.
older and more experienced, and the kind of person you bring into a company to say, hey, you've already done this. But right, in a relationship, I mean, look, this is not our business, but do you want your 18-year-old daughter dating anyone 37? Period.
Yeah.
Not to mention married, not to mention where
Right.
that went, and it obviously didn't, go well, and it was a big, big focus of the trial, part one.
Right. Well, I think,
And does it come up in part two? I
yeah.
don't know.
The other thing is I got to ask you, because you're watching jury selection right now. How tainted is this pool? I mean, there's 2 movies. One's out right now. I mean, the jurors can go home and watch The Dropout
Right.
on TV. There's been a book, and we have the results of the first trial.
I was going to say,
And
we
all
have
the
4
coverage.
months of this being in the news. Yeah.
Yeah, how do you select? I mean, you'd have to be living in a cave not to be affected by this story.
Well, right. I also sat in on the Elizabeth Holmes jury selection, and the questions were more along the lines of, hey, has anyone heard of Elizabeth Holmes? Has anyone heard of Theranos? And not a lot of people had. Not a lot of people had read Bad Blood.
Well, that's changed.
Exactly. And so now I've noticed people are saying, well, yeah, I know who Elizabeth Holmes is, but I can be impartial. Or Theranos, yeah, they were on my TV for a long time. Or I downloaded a podcast, or it was in my social media feed, and hey, I saw those text messages or whatever,
Yeah.
but I can be unbiased. Some people admitted Sonny Balwani, he's the heel of that story. I don't like him.
Yep.
And so obviously, they're going to try to get rid of those guys. But
And poor Amanda Siegfried.
well,
I mean, I could see how this could be tainted, that you're seeing them as characters now.
yes, they're that famous.
Yes.
And it's interesting just seeing the dropout. The actor who plays Sonny Balwani
Yeah.
is that guy. I think it was from Heroes. He's a very, very handsome actor.
Right.
Very good-looking man. And I thought back to when Moneyball came out and the Oakland A's owner was played by
Right.
Brad Pitt.
Brad
Who
Pitt.
gets that kind of treatment?
Yeah.
Where the actor is, admittedly a lot better looking than you are. Hey, maybe that'll happen to all of us. We all deserve that. But are people looking at that and then saying, hey, wait a minute, Sonny Balwani is not a young, terribly handsome guy. Who knows?
Is
There
the
are all sorts
national
of
national media showing up, or
the New York Times was there so far just for day one. I don't know
you're
where.
not fighting for a seat anymore?
Not yet.
Getting there at 4:30 in the morning.
No, mercifully not yet. And again, I don't know where this goes, and that's one of the reasons that we're paying attention. But I think by the next time we talk, we should have opening ceremonies, assuming they can pick a jury. They weren't able to completely seat a jury after
Yeah,
2
the opening
days.
remarks supposed to be today.
Well, that got put off till next week.
Okay, well, we'll see. That's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.